So we were talking about the Umbra document here. I'm just going to pull it up just so we can see it.
Sure. Yeah.
So you should be able to see it now, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I can. So yeah, the top secret. So some people say, well, top secret Umbra is the same classification that was used for the Citizens Against UFO Secrecy lawsuit. It was classified top secret Umbra, and it was highly redacted. So is this a legitimate classification? Yes, it is. Would it cover UFO material? Yes, it would. So that's good. The various acronyms that are listed down there, I have not analyzed, but by copying and pasting them into ChatGPT, you could certainly find out pretty quick. And I think they would. And the first page, you have the first
Right here.
What's the date on that one?
It's about 10 days before John F. Kennedy was assassinated. It looks like 11/12/63.
Yeah, 11/12/63.
Which is also the same date as that other document I wanted to go over, the one that apparently is from him to Director McCone.
11/12/63.
And I find these interesting because Danny Sheehan has stated that he's aware, I think he's aware of that document to McCone, but he says that's not what got him assassinated. What got him, that's what tipped off the CIA that he was now having back channels with Khrushchev, which is why I thought this document, this Umbra document, was interesting because it looks like he's talking to Khrushchev.
Yeah, I agree. There's lots of potential reasons why Kennedy was assassinated, and people have written whole books, Jim Mars, for example. There's lots of different theories. And then there's the burned memo, which says that if Lancer, which is the code name for Kennedy, isn't cooperative, that the situation should be wet, which is a code word for assassination. That's on the website, the burned memo.
Burn memo, BURN.
Yeah, burned, like fire.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank you all for tuning in. If you're enjoying this episode and want to help us uncover more mysteries of the universe, don't forget to support Curious Dimension. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps get this content in front of more people who are curious just like you. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to click that notification bell too, so you're the first to know when we release new content. For those of you listening on your favorite podcast platform, make sure to follow or subscribe to the show and leave us a rating and review. It helps more than you know. And whether you're watching or listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below or send me a message. Thanks for being part of the Curious Dimension community. Your support keeps this journey going.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
I'll pull it up here. Let me share it with you so everybody can see this.
Yeah.
So that's this one right here, correct?
Yeah, that's a series. Now, from this document, there's a bunch of things I can say that are exciting.
Okay.
One is that the CI stamp in the upper corner, a counterintelligence, is totally accurate. We've seen that sort of thing in the National Archives.
Over here.
Yeah. And the Majestic and Jehovah are both valid. I don't know what Enviro or Parasite or Perihelion are, and that's to be discussed or figured out. But it says, do not remove from safe Fritz for JJA, which is James Jesus Angleton. This is part of the counterintelligence group. And this is where Thomas Cantwell apparently was the leaker, was asked to destroy these files and changed his mind and pulled it from the fire. And then, so that was what they look like. Let's see if I think I have, oh yeah, I have the originals.
Do you have the originals?
Yeah. See, so people in the camera can see the original ones with the
Let me
birth
stop the
marks.
screen share so we can see a little bit better.
Yeah. You can see the originals with the ink and the bird marks and the pencil and so forth. And then I'm trying to find the exact first.
How did you get the originals?
I got the originals from Tim Cooper, who got them from Thomas Cantwell. And since my father passed away, I could always take them, but I took them from his safe. And so I have the originals. So and you can do forensics on the stamps and so forth to try to prove that they're real, provided you have another exemplar to look at or compare to, just looking for the exact directive that discusses the assassination or
Have you looked into any of the documents that were released last week out of the 80,000?
of Kennedy stuff.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Hopefully somebody scans them all and
Oh,
does OCR on them so we can do searches and put them in a database. And
oh yeah. There's multiple people working on it at the moment. Just,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Biological weapons. This is interesting, this biological weapons directive. We'll get to this directive
Okay.
regarding BW or biological weapons. And this is really in the context of a crash retrieval or some sort of deliberate landing or something out of control type event. And it says designated MJ-12 projects should be held in readiness to perform assuming spiking the area with biologics and house cleaning, the cleanup of it, operations in major population centers in the event of conventional methods are not satisfactory. Specialists from MK Ultra, which we know are real, Artichoke, which we know is real, are hereby activated to conduct domestic. So here's the CIA actively doing stuff on U.S. soil, which they aren't allowed to do. So that's
doing operations on U.S. soil.
Yeah, operations on U.S. soil and so forth. Angleton was a wild card. He wore a top hat, tails, and was very cloak and dagger. And yeah, here it is. The next one, directive regarding project environment. When conditions become non-conducive for growth in our environment and Washington cannot be influenced any further. I think they're talking about UFO research, crash retrievals, all that stuff. The weather is lacking any precipitation. So there's no hope of figuring out it should be wet, a code name. It's a subtle directive that we ought to consider an assassination attempt. So that's and the other elements in the Bird memo, which are on the majesticdocuments.com website, that people can look at and read and study. And I urge everybody to do it.
Oh yeah.
I'm just, I have a full-time real job and I specialize in crash retrievals, but I'm now shifting to man-made gravity control craft. That's my new focus besides artificial intelligence. So those are some of the Bird memos, which are highly relevant and they're original. The other one that's original that people often don't talk about is the Encyclopedia of Flying Saucers or the
Psalm. That's not the Psalm, is it?
it's not the Psalm. It's the Encyclopedia of Flying Saucers. And so
Okay.
it's the highest classification for this document is top secret magic, no foreign dissemination for U.S. eyes only, exempt from declassification errata, originating agency, declassification authority, special handling required, not releasable to foreign nationals. So this is a manuscript, 300 some odd pages of typed material that Vernon Bowen, a New York copywriter in basically the mid 50s through 60, went to the New York Public Library and collected all these cases, what he considered credible cases of UFO encounters, and wrote this book, this manuscript. And we talked to his son, and Patrick Bowen, and he had the original typewriter. He remembers his father typing.
Wow.
And then, as a good steward of, I guess, the Cold War era, he took this manuscript and mailed it into the Air Force and asked permission for him to publish it. And I don't know what happened there, but they didn't say yes, and they didn't return the manuscript. However, some 39 years later, in 1999, it was mailed back from the Freedom of Information Act office at Fort Meade in the original form. And the front page is interesting, but the whole chapter on the Air Force is stamped top secret magic.
So
And
this is a 300-page
right. 300
booklet.
It's a type manuscript. Yeah, I'll show you some other pages just to get you.
Is this in the on the Majestic website?
No, it's not.
Okay.
So this is an example, but it is in the Encyclopedia of Flying Saucers, this book, which is on Amazon.
And that's the whole thing.
That's the whole thing. It's the whole book. In our commentary, my father and I's commentary about the authenticity and the interesting handwritten notes, the marginalia that goes on. And so that's the part. There's comments from Vannevar Bush in there. There's 3 or 4 reviewers, Simon Petzel, some comments like, what is Don Menzel doing?
Right.
In relation to a comet. But the one that fascinated me the most, because I was interested in gravity, was there was a comet. Let's see if I've got it here. That Vernon Bowen, could it be that these craft are not all extraterrestrial and some were man-made? And then he typed that, and then the reviewer in pen writes on the side, this should not get out.
What year is that? Is that being written?
Yeah, I don't really know. I suspect that he turned it in 1960, ostensibly. I suspect for the next 5 years, people might have looked at it, comments about it, but it might have been 6 months. You don't really know. The forensic ink work, which is discussed in the book, because we did forensic ink and pencil
vernacular.
Learned so much about when was this ballpoint pen used commonly or not. Is it old, not old? It's tough to say a date. It's not like
interesting.
Rates.
It's interesting because if that is from the 60s, it's an interesting comment, because one would think that in the 60s we hadn't, or maybe we had just scratched the surface of crack and gravity. Year dates like 1954, but it's interesting that's coming out at that time. Yeah. Today, that makes a lot more sense when people say, oh, maybe we've already cracked gravity. Yeah, you can wrap your head around it today.
Yeah, my research, I traced back to 1951, where CE Labs out in the Coachella Valley out by Palm Springs had multi-millions of dollars and 8 or 9 guys working on a gravity insulator. And then there's all sorts of newspaper articles in the mid-50s on G engines and New York Herald and so forth, and Convair and TRW and Lear and Northrop and Lockheed, where I was the Glenn L. Martin Company, all working hard on and the RIAS group, the Research Institute of Advanced Studies, where those were the team. They had really crackerjack theoretical physicists and mathematicians that were all hired by the Glenn L. Martin Company.
Glenn L. Martin.
Glenn L. Martin, yeah. So Glenn L. Martin is then emerged with Martin to Marietta, and Marietta was totally into coup, continuity operations, and COG, continuity government, loads of underground bases. They did a lot of the nukes in early submarines and in remote piloted areas. And so Martin and Marietta had tons of government contracts that it made total sense to get together. I think that the Glenn Martin Company with George Trimble cracked the code in gravity in 1960 or thereabouts, plus or minus a year. And then when they merged with Marietta, that's when things got crazy, and they decided not to give Marietta the secret gravity control formulas and the equations. And then there's comments by Ben Rich. You've heard that before.
Yes.
We have the technology to take ET home.
And just so everybody knows, Ben Rich was head of Lockheed Skunk Works, correct?
For 15
years. He famously said that in the 90s. We now have the technology to take ET home.
Yeah, 93 at UCLA in a public forum. Jan Harzan was there and asked him how it worked and so forth. And he,
Jan Harzen was head of MUFON.
yeah, former head of MUFON for 5 years, I think. And so that's just one quote that's indicative of supportive. Now there's other cases. Michael Schratt turned me on to
He's done some amazing work highlighting Leonard Stringfield's work, but he is really dedicated.
Yeah. He turned me on to the Eddie Laxon case, which is March 366, 5 a.m. Eddie is an Air Force Master Sergeant driving to work and rounds the bend in Temple, Oklahoma area and sees this elongated teardrop-shaped craft. A man, a human being, with the veil turned up and chevrons and insignias on his shoulder, standing or kneeling outside the craft. So he gets out of his car and starts walking over to him. The man sees him and then he gets in the craft and flies away. But it has this long, sharp tail, electrostatic wick on it. It's got little horizontal stabilizers on the back. It's not your typical saucer or
looks quite human.
Yeah. It implies that certainly by 66, we had gravity control. There's other cases too they're even earlier than that. 64. It was in upstate New York. I'm trying to remember the name. It'll come to me. But Mary Ann was the name. She was the day before Thanksgiving. She's a 20-year-old and she's staying with her mother. And she walks outside about midnight to let the dog out. And clear night. And she sees this UFO come down, hover, and then lands a little ways away. This maybe a quarter mile, third mile. So she calls her mother. They get the binoculars and they watch as men get out and start taking the saucer apart and working on it. And then 45 minutes later, another saucer comes down right next door. And more men and toolboxes come out. And for the next 4 hours,
she observes
these men, tall figures, take apart something the size of an ottoman, trying to put it in, take it out. It reminds me of fitting a car engine or something. He kept cutting off pieces of tubing, and she eventually came over or went up there and found a couple pieces of stuff, but they mysteriously disappeared. So just another example. I'm going to go through all this stuff at Contact in the Desert.
Oh, yeah.
Copious detail.
So you'll be at Contact in the Desert. Is that in June or is that end of May?
End of May, early June.
End of May, early June.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I want to make it out there for one of these contacts. That's everybody that I want to hear speak is usually at that thing.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic event. One other thing that you've covered before, I think, is we can go on another document, but if you have time tonight, I'd love to get to the Cape Girardeau case. I know you're pretty proficient in that one.
Yeah. Yeah. We can talk. Cape Girardeau's reviewed in the Magic Eyes Only, but one of the majestic documents mentioned the Missouri in a 41 case. And that dovetailed with Stanton Friedman's familiarity with Reverend Huffman and Charlotte Mann. Reverend Huffman, the story goes, he lived on Main Street in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and was called in the spring or fall, we don't really know, 41, to provide blessings and to 3 dead, allegedly cloned aliens. And he does that, and the military comes in, sweeps it all up, and there's a photo taken, but that photo disappears, Polaroid. But we hear about this story because Reverend Huffman, who is an interesting character in that he was a Baptist turnaround specialist.
What is that?
He would come to various parishes and hang out for a couple of years and drum up the participation and the coffers, because he was apparently charismatic and very effective at building up dwindling parishes into a more vibrant organization.
Uh-huh.
And he did that several times. But
bar rescue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like a turnaround specialist in business. So for churches in the 40s. So he's an interesting character, but he tells his wife all about this story. And when Flo Huffman was passing away, this Charlotte man, who's the granddaughter, had heard sort of bits and stories and teased her every once in a while at dinner conversation, something about the aliens of the crash or this or that. And finally, when Flo was almost passed away, it was in the last few days, she pressed hard to get the whole story. And she's been interviewed on videotape by me, by others. Rich Dolan's interviewed her. She's very genuine, very sweet, very
She's just honest.
yeah, very honest, very genuine. And it was the subject of I think 2000 fun conference proceedings. I came in Orange County, and it's in my book, Magic Eyes Only, along with many other cases. And then you did other forensic investigations too. You go to the National Archives and try to find the aerial photography, figure out where precisely did it crash. Or you look at the fire department logs and see when the fire department was called out. What was the date of that? And who went? Find the pictures of the fire department and
Find the firemen.
Yeah. So there's that sort of thing. Yeah. And and then actually another little lead that was fun is that Cape Girardeau was a weird place that it's the home of Rush Limbaugh and Rush Limbaugh Jr., who had the podcast and so forth. The Rush Limbaugh Sr. was plugged into Cape Girardeau politics and had complete access to everything. He was on the city council or buddies with the mayor and very close and knew all about this and told his son, Junior. And one time somebody called into his show in Florida, I think, and asked about this Cape Girardeau UFO crash.
Asked his son or asked Rush Limbaugh?
Asked his son on air about this Cape Girardeau UFO crash. And he said, I really don't want to get into it, but there's more to it that meets the eye. So he didn't want to go there on his super Republican.
He didn't want to turn it into a UFO podcast or a UFO radio show.
Yeah.
Even though that might have been probably one of the more interesting things that was ever brought up on his whole show.
Yeah, probably.
And one of the things that's also interesting about that case is that's 1941. So we're talking like 6 years before the Roswell event. And as you start to dig into this topic, there's all these different cases that go back. Like even David Grush talked about the Magenta case in Italy.
Case, yeah.
You start to see that there's really nothing new under the sun. These things have happened. And now you've got teams like Skywatcher that are claiming they can organize a landing and sightings.
Yeah. One of the other majestic documents, I think, highlights that we're going to begin to investigate all the way back to the 1897 crash, which is Aurora, Texas.
Is this an airship?
Yeah, this is the airship. I'm trying to think.
That was the era of all the airships coming around.
Yeah. So it's one of the original March 5th, 1942 memos for the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit from George C. Marshall to the president.
And where's George C. Marshall?
He's the chief of staff for the military.
Okay.
And just a little sidebar. Excuse me. His personal papers are all at the Virginia Military Institute. And I went there. All his desk calendars are there. So you went to 1947. And there's a dentist in April. And you can see it's all totally legit. But when it gets to July through September, all those pages are missing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's okay. That's confirmation. Because it would say, I met with the president, or you can see other cases for evidence for a Roswell event. But this early one, this is one of the earliest documents, 1942, and it talks about the Army Air Corps also recovered the craft in the San Bernardino Mountains and identified it as a unconventional craft. So this is on the Majestic. And then at the bottom, it says, I have further ordered a thorough investigation of all War Department files regarding the unconventional aerial phenomenon UAP, unconventional aerial phenomena. First usage of that.
Right.
Yeah. Reported since 1897.
Hmm.
So that implies the Aurora, Texas crash in 1897. So that's, the majestic documents are so rich. When you go to the site, you can just spend hours reading and thinking.
There's so much there.
Exactly.
And they're all interesting. They all are. It's we know now that something like Majestic 12 absolutely existed. Lou Elizondo has confirmed this, and it makes sense that you would have a group of people, your thought leaders at the time, be part of this.
Yeah, and it's really Harry Truman who gets the white hot report in September of 47. And this is, it's dated 19 September 47, but that's when it was typed, and then it was signed the 24th of 47. And it's got Wiedemeyer and Marshall and Van Bush and Kenneth Royal and approved Harry Truman. I will keep for further study, which is what Harry Truman said. It has everything on it, and it basically outlines that my recommendation at the end is that we set up a top secret research and development intelligence gathering organization, top secret Majestic 12. Yeah.
Which obviously grew over the years. I'm sure it was 12 members initially.
Yeah.
I'm sure Vannevar Bush was part of it. And
yeah, he was the big scientist guy. But in the White Hot report, there's a description of the neutronic power plant.
right.
There's lots of technical details that you can check. It's fascinating reading.
One of the other documents I wanted to bring up was the Marilyn Monroe document. This one's always interesting. It's dated, I think, a couple days before she actually died. I'm going to put it up on the screen here. It's hard to read it, but let me know you guys can see this. Should be up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you want to take us through this a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. So you'll see 3 August 62, moon dust. And moon dust, we know, is a real thing. And not only did Kevin Randall write a book about moon dust, there's 2 crashes in Magic Eyes Only that the primary source is officially released State Department moon dust documents. So those are there. And then just recently, when I was on the NARA National Archives website, as they're now trying to post up UAP stuff, I typed in moon dust. Sure enough, there was a moon dust officer assigned to one of the ICBM silos.
Really?
Yeah. And so they knew that the UFOs go towards ICBM or.
So moon dust is a subgroup within some 3-letter agency.
Yes. And ostensibly, I think it was designed to recover space junk, but occasionally it got UFO stuff. And so that's sort of, and then it sent it to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So Marilyn Monroe is a famous actress and died mysteriously of overdose. But she was also very good friends with Dorothy Kilgallen.
Who was it, a reporter?
Yeah. Dorothy was a reporter in the UK, I think. And she had lots of super high-level connections. And she was a looker just like Marilyn Monroe. So there's evidence and discussion for Dorothy Kilgallen as well. I was just.
So it suggests that Marilyn was going around town after Kennedy had called it quits with her. And she was going to all of the Hollywood parties and flapping her gills a little bit about how he was telling her all of the secrets about UFOs and the whoever caught wind of this, right?
Yeah. And I looked up the quote for Dorothy Kilgallen. I wrote this other recent book, UFOs, Who Knows? Anthony. Did we talk about this last time?
No. What is this book?
Just a sidebar. I believe that there's three major problems in ufology: credibility, leadership, and money. Those are the big three. And so this is my attempt at improving the credibility. It's a book of famous quotations from astronauts, celebrities, scientists, presidents, religious leaders, government officials, and all about UFOs, along with a short bio about each one.
Do you
So,
have Hayam Eshed in there? The Israeli.
yes, it's a great one. I think we do. I think we do. He would
He
be,
said an
yes, here
explosive
he
one a
is.
few years
He
back.
would be he was under military, page 136. So,
Wow, there you go.
but I was going to do with Dorothy Kilgallen, was because we were talking about Dorothy. She says, this is in a statement in Timothy Good's book, Need to
Above.
Know. Timothy Good did great work. He's still alive, but he's failing. Flying saucers are regarded as of such importance that they will be the subject of a special hush meeting of world military heads next summer. This is 1954. So
By Dorothy Kilgallen.
by Dorothy Kilgallen. So she's implying that top military leaders are going to powwow, not just US, but UK, all these are going to get together, probably some NATO members, and talk about the UFO problem. And Dorothy Kilgallen was a US gossip columnist and TV personality from London on May 23rd, 55. She was sent an INS wire to the US claiming that the Ministry of Flying Saucers was expected to be a worldwide response. It goes on. So this is just one example, but other examples in the book of celebrities, as you'd expect. I mean, Jackie Gleason, Aykroyd, Steven Spielberg, Kurt Russell, Shaquille O'Neal, Glenn Ford, Muhammad Ali, Aaron Rodgers, Nick Jonas, Demi Lovato, Bill Torme, Iris, Kasha, Keith Richards, David Bowie, John Lennon.
Yeah.
This is now some of them are pretty shallow. Hey, I saw a light in the sky. I watched it, but some of them are pretty cutting.
Dramatic.
Yeah, dramatic.
I know John Lennon's son had a dramatic sighting when he was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
He was flying, I think, to New York to see his dad. And he looked out the window and he saw a saucer-shaped craft. And he tells the account on the Joe Rogan podcast that it was quite dramatic, and I think it affected him. He was kind of like, he said he had a very good look at it, and it was just there.
Well, we got to put that in the second edition. We're making a list of all these people that we want to add in the second edition. So there's 185 quotes. So if you slide this across the table to anybody and say, take a look at this, and they're at all open-minded, they will come away with, oh my God, there's a conspiracy, there's cover up, there's something real here, all that. So that's on Amazon too. I just did that 6 months ago.
Okay. UFOs, who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. Question mark. Yeah. We want to know who knows it now. Philip Corso, lots of Lou Alzondo's in there. There's some modern ones, but we're constantly adding more and trying to get more big time celebrities to throw their hat in the ring.
Yeah.
I was down visiting Commander Will Miller down in Florida.
Willard Miller?
Willard Miller, yeah.
From the Wilson Davis memo, he's cited in there.
Yeah, exactly. And I was at his house and he said, Ryan, did you hear about this? And he pulled out a magazine or a brochure, and it was a youngish woman cruise liner captain who recounts and has the video of, which is maybe online, I think someplace, at least Will Miller said that, where people in the audience say, what's the strangest thing that's ever happened to you as captain of this cruise ship? And she says, the strangest thing was when off the port bow, this huge jellyfish type thing, size of cars, came up and floated over the whole whole ship, and went back into the water.
Wow.
And people were videotaping it, and she has a videotape, and lots of witnesses and tentacles.
And I had a drone on board, so I thought it would be a nice night to catch a sunset. I had the drone in my hand, and someone said, what's that? And we look up, And there was, I put it on TikTok, it looked like a black jellyfish, a gigantic black jellyfish, and it sailed right over the retreat, directly through the center line of the ship, right through our X and our stack, and just floated through. Thing was, we had no wind, maybe 5 knots at the time, but this thing was cruising along about 10, 15 miles per hour, just cruised right over, and as it passed the stern of the ship.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy today because there's so many videos online now. It's hard to determine what's authentic and who've doctored something up in their house with some of the latest technology that's available on your cell phone.
Yeah.
When these videos arrive from 20 years ago, it's harder to discount that. And then you also have to ask the question now, okay, like how graphic does it need to be to motivate people to understand that there's probably something going on here? And the question is, it probably has to be extremely graphic and it has to be told by someone pretty high up. Have you seen Age of Disclosure yet?
No, I have not.
Yeah.
That's just out. It's been, 3 weeks or something like that?
They debuted it at South by Southwest in Austin, I think, a couple weeks back. But I don't know if it's available for streaming yet, but I've been trying to find it. But I mean, there you go. You have some very senior people, high level people, like I'll just name one, like Marco Rubio's in that, talking about the UFO phenomenon and disclosure. And this is somebody who's got presidential aspirations. So you're knocking on the door now of getting those people who have these high level positions talking about this.
Yeah.
And that was not the case 10 years ago.
Absolutely not. We had our first crash retrieval conference in 2003, and it took 20 years before Grush showed up in Congress. I will comment about disclosure for a moment. There are all these gradations of disclosure, and people have thought long and hard about the process of disclosure. And to some extent, Hollywood has done their part over the last 30 years to further desensitize people to the reality of aliens and good guys and bad guys, and they're in the movies and so forth. And they're in commercials and they're targeting kids. And so there's that. But it's a question of how do you balance the transparency that public wants and the secrecy that the government needs? And
it's a dance.
Right. And so do you say, okay, yeah, Roswell's real. Okay, can we see pictures now? Yeah, okay, here's some pictures. Our next briefing is in 3 months. At that time, I will show you bodies. And we show you bodies and stuff. Can we see what you autopsied? The autopsy results. That next briefing is in 3 months. And so you just drag it out and spoon fin it a little bit at a time so everybody gets used to it. And that's to some extent what's answered in the AI ufologist is how to do that and how to disclose in a measured, thoughtful way. Everybody just wants the truth.
Yeah, for sure.
I remind you of that scene in the park bench scene in that Ghostbusters.
What year are we talking about?
There's a movie, the park bench scene where I think Will Smith is talking to.
Oh, Men in Black.
Men in Black. Yes. Thank you.
Talking to Tommy Lee Jones.
Tommy Lee Jones. Why don't we just tell them, no, you can't handle the truth. And the question is, what is the truth? The whole truth, nothing but the truth. I'm not sure that we really know. There's multiple races with multiple agendas, exposing themselves in different ways. And you can make it very upsetting for the population or pretty easy going.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I would not want to be like Lou Elizondo or one of these guys who's championing disclosure. It just seems like a giant nightmare. Like, how do you disclose something like this that has so many different pieces and so many different aspects of it? And then, like you said, if there's one sort of race that is physical and biological like us, there's probably multiple. And then are they aware of each other? Are they aware of us? Are we aware of all of them? So it's like it gets quite complicated.
Yeah, said that they were. I think that although it was pretty subtle. Obama may have told the truth and this is it, who knows, book.
Is that in Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah, it's the Jimmy Kimmel quote. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where he says, Jimmy Kimmel, did you look for the secret UFO information? That's the first thing I would do, which is what Jimmy Kimmel wanted. And Barack says, he laughs, the aliens won't let it happen. You have to reveal their secrets. They exercise strict control over us.
This is what Obama's saying.
This is what Obama says. And I think he's right on, is that they do exercise strict control over us up to a point in certain areas. They don't want to
give me an example. What do you mean by that?
I think that they don't want any nukes going off.
That's for sure.
That would definitely rip holes in the dimensions of the time continuum or
ruin the planet.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it. And all the warnings have been you're screwing up your environment. But I think they're perfectly content to let the war in Ukraine go on, the Middle East boil over, or lots of inhumanity to man.
So there's things that they'll allow and things they won't. Like perhaps, like you said, like they probably don't want us, the stewards of the planet, trashing the place and writing off.
Yeah. I think there's definitely rules. As you mentioned earlier, Ahmad Mashad or Assad.
I am Eshed, the father of the Israeli space program.
Yeah. He said there's a Galactic Federation, and Dorothy Kilgallen in 1954 sort of hinted at that again. So if there is one, which is logical, believable, that they meet all the time to say, let's set up a criteria for planet Earth to join the cosmic kindergarten. And I think they abduct a lot of people. They plant a lot of memories and thoughts and direction. And my attitude is the criteria for disclosure. I mean, ET's showing up to the White House lawn saying, you can now join the cosmic kindergarten, is get rid of your nukes, clean up the environment, educate everybody, feed everybody, and stop wars. That's a really tall order, but I'm going 2050, 2065. The disclosure isn't around the corner.
The term Galactic Federation gets a lot of flack, and rightfully so, because when you hear it, you're just like, that just sounds silly. That just sounds like something out of Star Trek. And it does. But if you break down what that actually means, all you're basically implying is that if there is a non-human intelligence, okay, Grush said that's true. He says there's biologics, so that means it's as physical as you and I, at least one aspect of it. So why wouldn't there be more than one of those? Most likely there's multiples of those. And so you can connect the dots and say they might be aware of each other and they might be doing things, and they may be doing things occasionally that get in the way of each other. So they may have to have a meeting here or there. We're saying like, look, we're doing this over here. You do this over there. And so you can see how that could eventually snowball into something that could be called a Galactic Federation, even though it's probably just more like some entities that are aware of each other and they say, hey, we do this, you do that. It doesn't have to be a bunch of different types of aliens sitting at a round table with an insignia on their lapel, like with a hammer, like having the Hall of Justice.
When the first atomic bomb was detonated in July of 1945, I think that event was heard throughout the galaxy. And all the ETs, advanced civilizations, said, oh, wow, planet Earth has suddenly woken up and we got to pay attention because they're going to keep messing things up. And when the first hydrogen bomb went off in 1952, there was all these overflights shortly thereafter over Washington, D.C. Sort of a reminder that, hey, we're here.
Yeah, what are you doing?
What are you doing? And the whole anthropologists, the alien anthropologists, say, we've seen this movie on planet Earth 1,000 times before across the galaxy. And it's an interesting time to see whether or not you blow yourselves up or you survive enough and manage your intricacies to join the cosmic kindergarten. And their timelines are, hey, they're living for hundreds or 1,000 years or something, and
Right.
up to 100. The institutional memory is it's getting better all the time with computers and so forth, but still, it's if it isn't a hot TikTok, it's just not happening.
Yeah. That's why these conversations I think are so important. It's one of the few topics out there that kind of bridges the gap for everybody on the planet, right? What other perspective are you going to get that kind of brings us all together and says, hey, we're just one human family by acknowledging that there's other types of sentient beings on the planet? Immediately, we're the home team. There's not many other, there's no other topic that would do that.
That's a
So,
good point, man. Yeah, it is. Reagan even highlighted it in his speech for the UN. What happens if we had an alien invasion? How much we would ignite or unite the world in defense of a common foe.
yeah. And
But
it's unfortunate you would have to assume automatically that it is a foe, that it's an enemy coming in. That hopefully you wouldn't, that would probably be a bad form if you have sort of neighbors and all of a sudden you're considering them like bad just because they're not us. But
yeah,
that would be a way to unite people.
well,
But hope,
it's pretty clear that there's multiple races visiting, and they seem to have different agendas. And people don't get that. The Greys seem to be abducting people, maybe less so now, but there's the Nordics, which seem to be more altruistic and supportive, for the Pleiadians, and then the reptilians after control. And I'm not an expert at all in that world. And there's many other very learned people that Whitley Strieber just did a new book all about the Greys, which is
fourth mind.
Fourth Mind. Yeah. Fourth Mind.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful. I didn't know that they had 4 quadrants in their brain. It's like when you suddenly think, oh my God, they got 4 quadrants. It's okay. Humans only use 90% of their brain, or 10% of their brain.
Right.
90% is wasted,
Right. Or not, we don't know how to use it or how to tap into that.
Yeah. What's
Yeah.
up with that? Or our ESP ability is suppressed, isn't developed culturally. So yeah, they're much, much smarter, better memory bandwidth. And they've seen this.
They've seen this play out probably multiple times.
And it reminds me of the Roper poll. I don't know if you ever heard of the Roper poll before.
No, what's that?
So the Roper poll, there's been a couple of polls these are professional polls done by the Roper organization. It's a survey organization. So they surveyed, I think, 45,000 people and asked them questions about UFOs, aliens, ETs, etc. And they went through a protocol to determine how many people were abducted. And based on the sample size and extrapolation of the to the U.S. population, it was 2.5 million people that have been abducted
In the US?
in the U.S.
That's a
And
significant.
if you Google the Roper poll or put the question in the UFOdex, you can find a copy of it online. And then there's another poll that was done by somebody, but it was professionally done. Robert Bigelow paid for it long ago. People criticized it because it had subtleties that led the witness in their mind. But you show up at some professional organization that does polls for a living, and you write them a check for $30,000 and they go do their work. It's like, you're not manipulating shit.
They're getting paid. They're doing their job.
Yeah, exactly. And they're surveying people. And these were all telephone surveys, live conversations. But so that's a very interesting one that people forget about, that, oh yeah, could be a lot of people that have had, and this was a long time ago. This was like late 90s, maybe early 2000. It may have continued on. And if you think that influencing a couple billion people would change the trajectory of the world or business, it could.
Oh, I think it could.
Yeah. The question is,
sig-
what do they do?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a significant amount of people.
Yeah.
Ryan, this was a really cool conversation, just like the
Cool.
last one. Tell everybody about UFOdex, about your websites and your books you got coming out, because maybe we could wrap it up with UFOdex, and then you can talk about that, because I think that's a really interesting thing you've created there.
Yeah, UFOdex. I used UFOdex to create the AI ufologist. Yeah, if I can share the screen, I think, and
Yeah,
bring it up.
go ahead. So
So
tell everybody what this is.
UFOdex is your portal to all knowledge on planet Earth on UFOs. So it's currently got 662,000 pages in it. And so those pages consist of about 750 books that have been scanned at OCR that I've selected to be relevant in ufology, as well as all the flying saucer reviews, all the MUFON journals, all the stuff from Stephen Greer, all the stuff from the Black Vault, all the stuff from the National Archives, which I've put up for my multiple trips, all the majestic documents, lots of rare material from Rand Corporation and the Roper poll we were just talking about. And so you just type your name in an email and you type in a question, any question you want. Try to be verbose and thoughtful. Don't just say, what's Roswell? Tell me the 10 witnesses that are most credible for Roswell, cite your sources, and provide a description. And you get a 1,000-word answer.
Wow.
So
Does it email it to you, or does it pop it right up?
no, it emails it to me right now.
Okay.
And then within 24 hours, you'll get an answer.
Wow.
And then if you want some other ones right away, you can go to the Ufology Speaks question. And then here's some canned FAQs.
Oh, cool.
Alien origins, reactions. So describe the nature, extent, and details of sexual encounters with aliens, or describe the ET and alien agenda for the top 3 ET races communicated to abductees and experiencers. This is what we were talking about before. And if you click on that link, you get a description of the characteristics, what the agenda is, and the Nordics. So it's all there. And
very cool.
I got another few months, will be over 1 million pages, I think.
Wow.
So that's UFOdex. And it constantly amazes me. Somebody was asking me about Robert Collins. Who's probably never heard of Robert Collins.
He's not responsible for the Collins Elite, is he?
No.
That's something different. Okay.
The Bill Moore aviary with Richard Doty, and he leaked about 10 different majestic documents, which aren't really on the website because it was always sketchy as to whether they were credible.
Sure.
But U.S. Air Force counterintelligence. But I had a mission. A customer said, "Who is this guy?" Boom, type it in. The answer's right there. And
that's so cool.
Yeah. So it's a great tool. Just, I have not been overwhelmed yet. I get 3 or 4 questions a day, and they take me 1 minute to solve each one. Yeah. But if I get 100, I'm going to turn it into a paid subscription or something. And
yeah, because then you're getting
$5 a month or some $10.
Yeah. Very cool. Ryan, this was awesome. I'd love to do this again. Every time I go through your website and I look at those documents, I'm like, I got to get Ryan back on here. I got to talk about these documents. This is just mind-blowing stuff. You and your dad have done some very important work to move this needle forward and bring light to this topic, which I think in a lot of people's eyes is probably the most important topic on the planet.
Right.
What could be more important? What is bigger than this?
I think fusion, low-cost fusion, which is my day job, is more transformational. And gravity control box would be more transformational. Immortality or virtual immortality, some sort of biologics that allow you to live to be 150 or something. Those would be bigger things.
Those would be bigger things.
Bigger things. Those are pretty tough. But you just got to do what you can do. That's what the leadership part is all about. Credibility, leadership, money. And you're doing the leadership part by doing podcasts, getting the word out, and trying to engage people into the topic. And everybody has their limits and their expertise. What's really missing, and I'm waiting for the pathway, is that we need $50 million spent on ufology.
Right.
Right now, it's maybe $2 million. And there's so many projects to do. There's two majestic documents written by Edward Teller, allegedly. And they're very interesting reads. But the question is, are they really Edward Teller? And so forensic linguistics on that and find some exemplars. It's hiring a professional lawyer and dropping $10K on the problem. And so all to bolster the credibility of those documents. But anyway,
Right.
leave them alone.
There's one document. I'll let you go after this one, but there's one document it's done the rounds on the internet forever. It's the one from Kennedy to McCone, where he wants like all the information on UFOs. Let me just pull it up real quick, because this one's been eating at me forever.
Oh yeah.
This one
Oh,
right
that
here.
one. Yeah. Yeah.
This one has done the rounds on the internet so many times, and no one's been able to say 100% authentic, not authentic, but it does show up 10 days before his assassination, November 12th, or at least it's dated November 12th, 1963.
And a little more context for that. That came from, I think, source S1 via Tim Cooper on the website on Majestic Documents. You can look at the sources. But this handwriting, what does it say? Angleton as directive. So it's somebody else. It's not Angleton's. But earlier, July 22nd of 63. So this is in the summer. The Kennedy signs a memo. This is unclassified, public. Memorandum from James Webb and Secretary McNamara.
This is a different memo you're talking about.
Yeah, a different memo. This is from the National Archives. And it may be posted under FOIA or NARA on the website. It says, the lead article in Reader's Digest this month states that the Soviet Union is making a major effort to dominate space while we are indifferent to this threat. I wonder if you could have some people analyze this and give me a response to it. So in the summer, he is pinging about UFOs. And so that's kind of interesting. And then, of course, the November 12th National Security Action Memorandum 271, which is again public, which is dated November 12th, 63. It's cooperation with the USSR on outer space matters. And Kennedy goes and says, I want you to share all the data with the Soviets.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that was the thing that said, hey, no, we can't have that. So,
yeah. And that's what, I mean, Danny Sheehan has said this multiple times, that he thinks that's what kind of tipped them off, that he was having back dealings with Khrushchev to start to disarm some of the nuclear warheads. And they weren't having that. And they weren't waiting for his term to be up. They were going to put it, this is according to Danny.
yeah,
They were going to execute him.
I think those times are gone. However, I must say that any significant foreign country could definitely assassinate virtually anybody, motivated. And that's destabilizing or problematic. And it's generally agreed upon that the leaders of the world don't do that. But it's definitely possible. If there's enough pissed off people, it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, again, Ryan, this was really fun.
Okay.
I'd love to chat with you again sometime.
Okay.
Have a great night.
You too. Thanks.
Take it easy, everybody.
See ya.